the previous videos, we mentioned about the valuation rules for variations, which is claimable under the provisional sum. We have so many conditions here that may lead to different rules of valuations in order to work out the amount claimable by the contractor. The general principles is the amount to be claimed by the contractor must be reasonable, not to be too biased to either side, not to the contractor side, and also not to the employer side. This rule will need to be made transparent to both the employers and the contractor, and to be implemented by the personnel, either the quantity surveyors or the architect. When it comes to the valuations, it needs to be objective. The quantity surveyors or the architect cannot simply decide an amount to be claimed by the contractor without good justifications. This brings to the importance of understanding these rules. We have discussed quite a details of these rules in our previous videos. Since there are so many conditions involved, it is still quite challenging to understand this. Maybe we can look at the flowchart here. This shall help you to better understand in the full picture in terms of the rules for the valuations of the work done under the variations. Bear in mind that this flowchart is only applicable for the variations work claimable under the provisional sum. You will see that there is no overlapping between all these conditions. That means every methods of the valuations are explicit to each other depending on different conditions. When we put everything together, the flowchart looks something like this. The flowchart starts here, whether the relevant word is similar to the contract. This will establish whether there is a variations or not. Let's say now the relevant word is similar to the contract in terms of the design, quantity, and quantities. There is no modifications, totally same as per the contract. That means there is no variations. With that, the contractor will carry out the work accordingly, and for whichever works being done, the contractor can submit interim claim. Upon receiving the interim certificate, payment to the contractor should be issued. The valuations will be done by the architect or the quantity surveyor on basis of the rates and the price as per agreed between the contractors and the employer as written in the contract document. Let's say now the relevant word is not similar to the contract. That means there will be variations. And go back to what we have discussed previously regarding the variations. It needs to be officially instructed by the architect, and there will be personnel to do the valuations, whether the quantity surveyor or architect. Now we will need to look into whether it is under the provisional quantities. We will cater for these rules first. If it is under the provisional quantities, the QS will need to do the remeasurements based on the actual quantity executed. The rates and price in the contract will apply. Let's say now it is not under the provisional quantities. That means it will be under the provisional sum. This part of the flowchart will apply. Before we enter this, let us first establish what is the provisional sum and what is provisional quantities. We have mentioned about this several times in our previous videos. Since this is always quite confusing among the students, we are going to mention about this again. The first checking here is whether it is under the provisional quantities, as these two by fundamentals are different. When come to the claim, we shouldn't have these two mixed up. Later the account it will be quite haywire and dispute may arise as a result of this. When we talk about the provisional quantities, it is the quantities which cannot be accurately determined during the formations of the contract. However, we know the nature of the work and the rate for the relevant work will normally be specified in the contract. As a result, the payment will be on the basis of the rate given as agreed in the contract. This leads to this outcome where the rate and price will be in accordance to the contract. Now we know that it is not due to the provisional quantities. That means these variations will be claimed under the provisional sum. The provisional sum is an estimated lump sum for the work, which at the instant of the formations of the contract, the relevant scope is not specified, or the specifications is incomplete to reasonably come up with a rate and quantity. That particular scope may or may not eventually be instructed to be carried out. That's why it is put under the provisional sum. And we did mention about the principles behind the claim is that the contractor is only entitled to claim for the work that he has already done. The contractor cannot claim for the work that is not exist and not being done by the contractor. Therefore, even though there will be a sum under this provisional sum, it doesn't mean that the contractor is entitled for the entire provisional sum. It will be based on the amount of the work done by the contractor. Then the relevant claim shall be entitled to the contractor. Now that you understand the differences between the provisional quantities and the provisional sum, let us proceed with the following steps. Now we know that it is not under the provisional quantity. That means it will be under the provisional sum. Now we will have to check whether the variations involve omissions of certain item. This one is more straightforward, because when we talk about omissions of the certain item, that means at the first place there will be quantities as well as the rate clearly stated in the contract. Now theoretically, we can deduct the amount of work in accordance to the price and the rate as per specified in the contract. However, we will need to first check whether the work conditions has substantially been changed due to these omissions. If the work conditions are not substantially changed, the rate and the price should theoretically be the same as per the contract. Then, the amount of the item being omitted shall be equivalent to the reductions in line with the rates and the price. Let's say now the work conditions has substantially changed. The original price and the rate might not be applicable. Now the valuations will be based on the price of the remaining item. These remaining items, it will be the amount of the work that is actually done by the contractor. Let's say now no omissions involved. Most likely it will be due to the additional scope of work. Starting from here, we have no direct references in terms of certain particular work. We will have to look for any part of the work having the similar characters. The relevant price and the rates will be used as the basis for the valuation purposes. So we will look for the similar words that having the similar characters as per the word under the variations. If there are similar words, we will need to check whether there is similar conditions for the relevant word. It is so that for us to check whether there will be adjustment required to the rates and the price as stated in the contract. Let's say now the conditions is similar. There is one more item that we will need to check, whether the quantities of the words is similar. If all these three are similar, that means we can adopt the rate and the price without much concern. The relevant rate and price should be reasonable with the assumptions it has already been agreed between the contractors and the employers. Now let's say the quantities are significantly different or the conditions are different. These are two factors that may influence the rates and the price. That leads to a situation that the rates and the price as given with the words with the similar character might not be applicable or might not be reasonable to any side, either the contractors or the employer. Under these circumstances, it will be based on the rates and the price in the contract serving as the basis, plus some fair adjustment in terms of the rate, whichever deemed reasonable and justifiable by the definitions of the architects or the quantity surveyors. This is about the valuations rules for the words which have the similar characters to the other work in the contract, where there are bases that we can refer from to work out the rates and the price. Let's say now when we check whether there are similar characters within the contract, none of the words have similarity with the words to be done under the variations, then the flowchart will go along this path. We're going to check whether the work can be properly measured or valued. Let's say now the work can be properly measured and valued. The quantities is measurable. The only that is lacking, it will be the price. In this case, the cost of the relevant work will be based on the fair market rates and the price as determined by the quantity surveyors. The total cost, it will be the calculated quantities multiply the rates and the price. Let's say now the work cannot be properly measured. Our first option is to quantify the works by the numbers of days. And if the rates for the day works is given, the day works rate in the contract will be applied. However, if the rates of the day works is not given, the cost claimable by the contractor, it will be the actual cost for the work plus 15%. With that, this entire flowchart here has comprehensively combined the relationship between different conditions related to the variations, giving you ideas the relevant rules or valuations. The colors here are made different to distinguish the conditions or the decisions and the valuations rules. This shall give you a better pictures in terms of the rules of valuations for variation, which is claimable under the provisional sum. As we have established just now, the variations can be claimable under the provisional sum and also not under the provisional sum. What we have introduced in this video here, it is claimable for the provisional sum.